Welcome to Customer Tech Talks. Thanks for joining us again. I'm your host, Ben Walters, and today we're going to be talking to Matthew Parks, Senior Director of Information and Technology from Pace Center for Girls, a non-profit who's focused on helping young women reach their full potential. But before we jump into the interview, let's take a look at the video.
Pace Center for Girls, we are a nonprofit organization that helps young women reach their potential through education, counseling, training, and advocacy to make a better future for themselves. Microsoft has been a great partner for us. We use Microsoft 365 throughout our entire premise, and we were able to move a lot of our information, data, and content up into the cloud. This helped when we were able to roll out Teams during this pandemic. We were able to set up our digital classrooms because Microsoft Teams has that built in already, and it allowed us to mimic that same on-premise environment that we have for our girls up in the cloud. We have young ladies that have come from very harsh trauma and overcome that to become doctors or lawyers. And that is the end goal, is to be able to take someone who appears to be broken, rebuild them into something that really helps them contribute back to society, but also be able to contribute back to themselves. Being a part of that really invigorates myself and invigorates my team, and it pushes us every day to make sure that we provide the best service and the best tools that we can. And it really makes the work worthwhile.
Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today. Great to have you with us.
Thanks, Ben. I appreciate the invite.
Now, it's really inspiring to see how Pace has been supporting the community for decades, and even more so over the past 12 months. Can you share a little bit about how you started your journey with Teams?
Well, specifically speaking of Teams, we started our journey by, we didn't really jump into it initially, right? You know, we saw that it was very similar to Yammer from the initial benefits, so we didn't really jump into it. Our on-ramp onto Teams deployment was the actual communication components. That once we saw that the direction away from Skype for Business, which we were a Skype for Business customer, and moving more toward the Teams, then my staff, my IT staff, started to really involve ourselves into the deployment. We started to coin a phrase that you guys use a lot: eat our own dog food. And then that helped us to become more familiar with how the UX experience was for the users and what that would look like. Once we started to do that, we started to pilot the deployment. And then the pivotal part came in September of 2019 when Microsoft made the announcement that Skype for Business was going away soon and the Teams was going to replace it, and they had an actual date. Then we marked it on the calendar, and by December of 2019, we decided to move the organization completely toward Teams and away from Skype for Business. And, you know, here we are a year removed from the shutdowns. That turned out to be a pretty pivotal decision for us.
Right, and a really fortuitous decision, obviously, given what happened over the past 12 months. Now, theoretically, you could have delayed that move and said, you know what, we're going to stick with Skype for Business for a little while. Can you explain a little bit around your decision to jump in double feet and kind of start this migration early? What drove you to that decision?
Well, I'll tell you, what drove us to that decision was that's our ethos, is we believe that being on the cutting edge actually benefits us more than trying to play catch up when it comes to technology. And particularly being a nonprofit, it is advantageous for us to try and make sure that we give our users and our customer an on-ramp onto the technology as early as possible. It helps to provide better adoption. It actually helps them to become more comfortable and acclimated to the technology. It allows us to put training out there as early as possible and communication out there as early as possible so that it becomes more of a natural feel to that product. We find that if you do it under duress, that you make a lot of decisions, and you also see that your ticket count starts to go up as people have more questions because this new thing that they suddenly have to involve themselves in, and their job depends on it. When you have a chance to roll it out slowly, to communicate ahead of time, and to really dig into the details of it, it makes for a better rollout, but it also helps you to meet the company needs and fill in any gaps that may happen.
Right, and as we know, like we said, it's been really kind of really great for you to be able to do that and reap those benefits over 2020. Now, it wasn't just your the staff and students who saw benefits in using Teams. You also have counselling staff who you were able to include on that platform as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you managed to do that and why Teams was so well suited to that?
Well, Teams is well suited to that because of the Microsoft HIPAA compliance that they built into the that you built into Teams and that you built into your premise. So it allowed us to go into the counseling phase virtually with our staff and our students, because we knew that we had that compliance components there, along with all of the other compliance that we meet inside the Compliance Center. Being able to apply that in a secure method gives us those results that when it comes to an audit perspective, or even when it comes to the trust component between the counselor and the student, that they have that component.
Right, and I know that over the past 12 months, Teams has come a long way with new features and new things coming online, but there are one or two key things that weren't there when you very first moved over at the start of 2020 that resulted in some other things popping up. Can you talk about what those shortcomings were and how you found people in the organization dealt with that?
Well, I'll tell you, shadow IT is always going to be a threat for any IT, any company with any IT department. So when we started to migrate to Teams, we saw that on the administrative side and the student side, or with the student and academic side, it was great. The counselors loved it. They didn't see a need to really move to something else. But from an administrative perspective, that was a different story. Teams had three really killer features that really lacked three killer features that competitors had, such as Zoom, such as the ease of use, the breakout rooms, and that 7x7 grid. Being able to have 49 people on a particular meeting at one time. That was enough of a game changer where even though we had well-documented cases of, security incidents where, people had walked away from Zoom because of that, such as Zoom bombing incidences and such, that people were really willing to still utilize the product for that particular premise. So we saw an uptick of shadow deployments of Zoom throughout the organization. And eventually we had to now support a second video conferencing component. And that was compounded by and again, it was an engineering challenge for Microsoft, but it was compounded by the fact that it took a long time for Microsoft to release the matching features.
Gotcha.
So, yeah.
And so as we think about that, you've really kind of made some great lessons and learnings around, how to deal with stakeholders and those kind of things as you've gone through that process, which is really great to see. And as you've said now, that reliance on that shadow IT operations has really kind of shrunk over the past year with those new features coming on, which is really great to see. Matthew, thank you again so much for joining us on Customer Tech Talks. It's been great chatting with you and hearing about your journey. If you'd like more information on the PACE Center for Girls or you'd like to get connected with them, you can check that out at pacecenter.org. And if you want more information on getting started with Teams, you can go to aka.ms/learnandignite for all the links and resources to get started. Now, we're always looking for new customers on Customer Tech Talks as well. And if you'd like to share your story, you can go to aka.ms/customer tech talks to get started. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.